I'm Tammy Dunnett, ex-Target workplace bully turned communication coach. But it wasn't that long ago when I lacked the skills, the tools, and the knowledge to ditch the drama, confidently handle difficult conversations, and create better relationships. Fast forward past many failed attempts and lessons learned, and you will see the business that I have today. One that is helping others just like you to find the confidence and peace knowing you can change your circumstances one conversation at a time. I created the Dissolve Workplace Conflict Summit to give you access to industry leaders who are sharing simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies so you can do the same. If you are an employee, supervisor, or an employer and you are looking to access the top strategies to successfully dissolve conflict without damaging your relationships, then you, my friend, are in the right place. I am delighted to introduce you to Dan O'Connor. Do you go by Dan or Daniel?
I go by Dan. Yep.
Perfect. Excellent. Then I got it right the first time.
You did. Thanks. Yep.
Dan is an internationally acclaimed author, trainer, and keynote speaker, and he's been leading the communication industry for more than 20 years. Through his best-selling books, Say This, Not That, and Energy Vampire Slaying 101, his #1 rated YouTube channel, Communication Training Videos with Dan O'Connor, his popular online course, onlinecommunicationtraining.com, and his breakthrough proprietary tactical communication learning system, Step Out of the Shadows and Speak, Dan has been setting new benchmarks in training and transforming the lives of millions of people, as well as countless organizations all around the world. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Tammy. That was really nice. Thank you.
Well, it should be nice. You wrote it.
That sounds so good coming from you. I'm like, I'm touched. I'm touched. Thank you.
Well, I am so excited to have you here. I came across your stuff when I was obviously preparing for the summit, and I'm like communication teachers, coaches, trainers, and boom, there's Dan O'Connor. Watched some of your videos, loved how you interact with the audience, and I knew you needed to be here.
Thank you, Tammy. As soon as you called me, I thought it's a perfect fit. So I'm very grateful to be here today.
So what we're going to talk today is about how to shut down rude, insulting, and passive-aggressive people. And I got to tell you, I'm probably in one of those categories from time to time.
We all are. We have to be honest with ourselves first.
Thank you for that, because I was like, oh man, he's talking right about me now.
No. Yeah, and it's important to know who we are. When our difficult person comes out, it's important to know that. And until we can really name it, we can't do anything about it. So it's good to know thyself, right?
Yeah. Now, I think in today's world, in today's culture, there's a lot of tension, a lot of stress, a lot of conflict. But not everybody's always being rude intentionally. So do you make a differentiation between intent at all?
Yes, as a matter of fact. My mom and I talk about this a lot because so many people really, it's maybe their communication style, or maybe they were having a bad day, or maybe they have no idea that they're being rude. But I think that is a big factor in how I respond and how I try to train other people to respond. Because if somebody's unintentionally being rude to me, and then I decide to, slam them or show them who's boss or whatever, and I intentionally hurt somebody's feelings, and basically treat them with lovelessness, that is all about me. You know what I mean? And so I have to remember that truth, that what they say is just a reflection of who they believe they are at the moment, and how I speak back to them is who I believe I am, and I don't want to believe that I'm that person. So unless it really requires some extra gusto, I try to remember that everybody's doing the best they can with what they have normally, right?
Mm-hmm. I love when you said lovelessness. Like that.
Oh, yeah.
Really had an impact, because I can certainly recall times when maybe I haven't been stellar in my communication, and there was one professional moment I'll never forget. It actually helped me to reconnect and re-engage with how I want to show up, because I didn't show up very well in that moment. But when you think of lovelessness, that was me, because I was all focused on me and not them. I was focused on my workload and my stressors and how they were like creating more stress, and I didn't even think about them.
Yeah, I just get goosebumps when you said that, because I felt it with you. And that's when we are communicating with anybody. I have the program called the 9 Principles, and it's all about different principles that you have to think about when you are working through any challenge that you have with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first principles is I have to remember that this is all just one relationship. And so if I am treating you with lovelessness, I'm doing that to myself, and it's just it's a toxic cycle. And I think we're at the time I don't know if you would agree, Tammy, but I think a lot of people would agree that we're at this time in our development that it's time to bring love into the workplace and say it's okay to say I'm a loving, compassionate, kind person, and that does not conflict with any professional ambition that I might have. And in fact, it actually contributes to any success that most of us will have, especially these days. So I'm all about loving at work. I'm all about it, because that's really, when you look at the leaders of today and the people who we want to, I think the people who are generally in my group aspire to be like, they're people who just said, forget, I'm just going to be honest and say, I, more than anything else, want to be loved and love other people. And one of the themes that I have in my communication training is, even if I'm, let's say doing combat, with a difficult person and have to stand up for myself, there's no message that I can't say that you can't say in a loving way. Because even showing somebody how to stand up for themselves, or how to treat other people, even when it can be tough, that's a loving thing to do. So love is a big deal with me. I'm all about the love.
Wow, that's just that's deep.
Is it?
That is deep. Yes. Because as you were, yeah, well, as you were sharing that, I'm like, okay, thinking back on that moment I just shared with you as a nurse when I didn't show up, that lovelessness was then again transferred onto me. Like, I internalized it because I'm like, I wasn't a good nurse. That was a horrible moment. I feel like I was down on myself as a result. So it really kind of perpetuated both relationships, and I mean, definitely informed me going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's true when especially women will ask me more than men will, how can I say XYZ without being seen as weak? I don't want to be seen, and I can understand where they're coming from, but the opposite of weakness is not strength. The opposite of weakness is love. When you look at people who are the creators and the have the most power in the universe, it's the people with the most love. So I have to keep that in mind, because it seems so contrary to the thinking of, especially in the United States, of our way of succeeding and getting ahead tends to be, let's put that aside, but that's not it at all. When you look at what it really takes in the universe, to create and to be successful and flourish, it all has to do with love. And that's like when you get to the end of the story of science or communication or whatever, it's always in the end that love's true kiss.
Yeah, everything always ends happy.
Yeah, love's true kiss comes and saves the day, and I'd rather get there sooner than later. Let's hurry up and get to the punch. And that's what people are surprised with many times when they engage in this type of communication training, because even though I believe it's sometimes a crisis situation people find themselves in, that they need really to find the right words to help them, not get just trampled all over. Those words can be at the same time loving. So that's a big deal for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like vulnerability is a real key piece to entering into these relationships, even the hard relationships, to stay in that vulnerability and stay in that love feeling, and being able to address somebody with kindness still.
Yes, because what it's like when you have to engage with somebody who's not coming from a very good place. There's nothing more disarming than just genuine, authentic communication. When you say, that hurts my feelings, or even if you're not saying that, when you're not trying to think of what can I say to make a point, or what can I say to make to score, but instead you're thinking, what can I say to be totally honest and forthcoming and forthright with my communication. That is really difficult to do. Like, to get on camera and to be yourself is so difficult to do, and to be ourselves anywhere is so difficult. And that's what what I try to help people do is, in these moments, I try to give you the words and the patterns to really help you just take your own thoughts and articulate them in a clear, direct, and compassionate way, because that'll get them. You can't argue effectively when somebody is just telling you, when you say this, I feel this way because of blah, blah, blah. It's when we start to put our ego first and engage in trying to just score points. That's when it just never ends. And we want to kind of get out of that cycle, right? Just a change in perspective. And when we change our perspective, things really do change. I guess, like, I don't know how much of my lessons you listen to, but I'm really big into quantum physics and just how things work. And it's true that when we simply change the perspective that we have when we look at things change on a molecular level, and stuff like that freaks me out. And so I know that when I'm changing the way I look at my father or my coworker, or my boss, they really change as people. I mean, there's a lot of power in that perspective shift, isn't there, Tammy?
Absolutely. It changes the past, the future, and the present. It is such a powerful thing.
Ah, that's it. It changes the past, the future, and the present. Totally. Like that when you forgive somebody, it changes what happened, what is happening, and what will happen all at the same time. Oh, that you're getting me today. I can't take it. I'm getting goosebumps. You're right there, Tammy. I'm telling you.
We're speaking the same language.
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of that communication, as you know, is everything, right? In a relationship. And since the relationship tends to be what we're here for, when we can speak those, forgiving words to somebody and treat somebody with compassion, like I'm sure you've had this experience where I will heal the person that I was, back in the past that had to deal with this and didn't do it. And it's as if it never happened, and there's truth. You can change the past and the future. So good, Tammy, you go change it.
I actually just recently was thinking that it's like childbirth for females. They always say you forget how painful childbirth is, and shifting perspectives and choosing to engage in new ways is like forgetting. I mean, like I was bullied and I was really sick for many, many years. But I don't feel that anymore. I don't have that pain. I can get triggered, but I don't live there anymore. That's in the past. So to me, it's like childbirth. That's how I came up with that analogy recently.
That's really good, because it is true. If women remembered all of that, the human race would die out, I'm sure, thinking, oh, let me find a different way. But so you actually let that go, that experience that you had. Wow.
And I don't
Lady, you have to tell me how.
Yeah, I don't actually. Was she a bully? I believe she turned into one. I don't think she knew how to handle. I didn't know how to handle. We didn't have the right communication tools. And we just kept doing the same thing over and over and hoping that one of us was going to bend. But neither of us were, because we were both stubborn. And so for many years, like I ended up with anxiety, panic attacks, and it got to the point where I was afraid to see her, afraid to be in the building, afraid to be on the block, afraid to leave my home. Like it got so bad, I was afraid to leave my home. So I wouldn't be here today if I didn't actually shift perspectives and start to do some inside work and see what I brought, right?
Wow. And have you talked to her recently? Or since you've been
no.
Tell me.
No, I haven't. But the very first, here's the funny part.
No.
The very first time I went to go speak publicly, I was doing the closing keynote at a conference, and I was talking about workplace bullying. I walked in the building. I hadn't seen her in, I think it was about 8 years, and she was there. She wasn't at my conference. She was at one right beside, but I walked right past her and I thought, oh my living God.
Isn't that a funny universal lesson? What do you think the lesson was? Like, how did that impact you?
I felt like it was the closing of a door. Like, here I am talking about my experience and I just saw you. And yes, I had a reaction. I was shaking, the emotions were right there. I was able to manage it so I could get on stage and still do my thing. And it was like an empowering moment, right? Like, you no longer hold this on me. It's our story.
Did you mention it? I apologize. Did you mention it when you were speaking?
I did.
Wow.
It was the first thing I said. I just have to let you know, like, this is what I'm here to talk about. And I just saw my bully in the hallway. And I'm a little bit, still buzzed from it. Like, like my energy is still a little bit off. I said, but I'm definitely capable of going ahead. So if I need a moment in this next 90 minutes, you know why, because I'm going to be telling my story at the same time. Like I just,
I bet that was a great event, like for you. I bet you had a great response.
I did. Yeah.
Isn't it funny those times when you're thrown off? Like, that's a tip that I have for myself. It doesn't always work for everybody else. But when I'm about to get on stage, I always tell myself, okay, please, help me, universe, forget what I had planned on saying and put something new in there. Whatever I'm supposed to say, put it in there. And those events where that happens unintentionally and you just can't help but be like, whoa, it's shaken. and you have to be authentic. It
Yeah.
really changes everything, right?
Yeah.
And they connect with you. Wow, that's interesting. You know, I saw my bully. I don't know if you heard this story, but
No.
on the my first book I ever wrote was Energy Vampire Slang, and on the cover page I wrote the first dedication was to my first energy vampire, Stuart Stockmo, and he was like my schoolyard. And the name is like so fitting. There really is a Stuart Stockmo, and every day I would come home and my mom would say, "Daniel, what happened today?" And I'd say, "Well, he did this," and she'd say, "Okay, what did you say?" And I'd say, "Well, I said, don't say that. Say this," and she would tell me, to say this, not that, which turned out to be. And so I'd go back and so I'd tell him what she told me to say, and then I'd report back to her, and she just went on forever. So I said Stuart Stockmo. So one day I was working at my friend's business, and I answered the phone. I, shaky self serve dog wash. This is Dan, and I'd been doing this for a while. I was just helping him out when his business started, and he said, "Hi, this is Stuart Stockmo. I'm Bubba," and I was like, "No, this isn't Stuart Stockmo." And he said, "Yes, this is Stuart Stockmo." And I'm like, "Stuart Stockmo, this is Dan O'Connor." And he was like, "All right, is so and so there?" And I'm like, "No, Stuart, this is Dan O'Connor. Hello." And I talked to him a couple times. He did not remember who I was, had no recollection at all. And I was like, "Oh my God, you changed my whole life." And I thought, it's true how it's so all about our perspective and us and in our head. And I thought, this is such a great lesson. I dedicated a book to you. He literally could not. He had no record. He was like, "I don't know what you're talking about, dude." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, I forgive you." Like, good. I don't know who you are, you weirdo.
That's amazing, because we often think people are spending their every waking minute and second thinking about ways in which they can torment us or ruin our lives. And here they're like, they didn't even remember you. What a relief.
That's true. I apologize for getting off topic, but it's true how we do project that onto people. And isn't it true when we find out what is really going on with anybody who's trying to make us miserable, it always comes down to the same thing where we're like, had I known that, I would have forgiven you from the minute I met you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it takes a while to get to get
I
to know
think that ties beautifully into shutting down rude, insulting, passive aggressive people, because we do have a perception and we do kind of enter into these relationships with it. But let's talk about maybe describing what rude, passive aggressive, and insulting looks like in the workplace, some examples, and how we can engage in a way that is loving, full of love.
Well, I should have known this in advance, but do you take a lot of questions from people asking, what should I do when this happens to me?
Like personally, when I'm coaching people and stuff? Or
yeah, I mean, like from the public.
Oh.
Yeah.
Typically what I get is, how do I file a complaint? Those kind of things. They don't look at what can I do first myself, because that's too hard. That's like a place we're not used to doing things.
Yes. Yeah. I find the same thing where people are asking, how can I set up a lawsuit? Or how can I what do I say when I go to HR? And sometimes it's difficult. It's a difficult lesson to learn that that's not going to serve you, any way ever. But so I tend to, as I'm sure you do, get a lot of questions about these particular difficult people. So I start out with them. When we're dealing with passive aggressive people, that's one of the most difficult types of person to respond to for most of us, because passive aggressive people insult you or are rude to you or are hostile to you in a way that is set up to not be able to call them on their behavior, right? And so it's an extra challenge for a lot of people. And that's where, as we were talking about at the beginning, real authentic, straightforward communication comes into play. And so I like to give people duct tape tactics or magic tricks. Duct tape we use as a quick fix for a lot of different things. And I like to have a whole bunch of those ready, so that if I'm in a situation where somebody snipes me, a sniper is, someone who insults you in public and, makes a joke about it, or if somebody just makes a rude comment, or somebody judges me and, makes a comment on, like, do you think that's an appropriate outfit for your daughter to wear? Something like that, judging my parenting. Those are the types of comments that a lot of us, because of the emotions that are produced at that moment, we're most likely to forget our words. So I recommend people have a set of flashcards, for example, and that's because that's what my mom always gave me, and they work so well. So I'll have flashcards with different responses for a variety of different situations. And like for a sniper, or well, let's go with the sniper. I tend to use with them what's called either a black light question or a a black light question or a clarifying question. And a black light question or clarifying question tend to sound like, when you say this, do you mean to say that? When you say XYZ, are you trying to say ABC? Or when when I'm thinking of all these different scenarios, when I do that, when I ask somebody, when you say XYZ, are you trying to say ABC? That does so many different things for us, because those words are pretty easy to say. If you, whatever your insult was, I'm just kind of repeating it back to you. When you ask me if I prepared for that meeting, are you trying to say it looked like I didn't prepare for that meeting? And when that we can say without putting too much thought in it as we're gathering our thoughts. You know what I mean? So if I have that basic speech pattern of, when you say this, are you trying to say that? Or when you say this, I could just put it out there, are you trying to insult me? Those types of questions are calling people on their behavior, so it takes all the fun out of it. When you respond to difficult people, I have to remember not to reward the behavior, right? So I have to remember to fight my instinct to engage. Tammy, you know what it's like when we are at home, like we're washing dishes thinking, that's what I should have said. And so we think, the next time they say this to me, here's what I'm going to say to them. And we get, we're waiting for the moments where we can prove that we are, in fact, the nastiest communicator of them all. And so then we try to do it, but like a sniper, they're sniping their whole life. They have a whole life's experience doing that. And so we tend not to win that battle anyway, that we feel even worse. Or even if we do win it, like, what do we win? The blue ribbon for the ugliest communicator. So when we have these types of duct tape responses ready, I can call you on your behavior. It takes the fun out of it. It doesn't reward it. And then people tend to choose their victim differently next time, And then, but we have to have, I'm a big proponent in having lots of different duct tape tactics ready. I tend to go like this. I'm thinking, where are they? I have all of them. I always have these flashcards around while I'm learning new things. And it sounds really simple, but I always encourage people to remember the 4 magic questions. When we say to people, that's interesting, why would you ask me that? Or why would you say that? Or why would you do that?
Oh my gosh, I have a story about that line.
Tell me.
Okay, so it happened today. This was the day I found out my boss was a bully, and not just a bad boss.
Oh.
Somebody who had been in our workplace. She'd been there probably a year at this point, and she said to me, I'm really glad I got to know you. And it was one of those moments I'm like, well, that's really interesting, but why did you say that? There was just something about it that didn't seem like a normal thing to say.
She was insulting you with that? She was insulting you with that?
No. She was genuine. She goes, I'm really glad I got to know you. And I thought, well, cool, I like you too, but why did you say that?
Oh, like, I'm glad I got to know you because at first I didn't like you? Or what was the twist on that? Was that it?
Yes, because my boss had warned her about me when she came to the workplace.
Oh, this was not the bully boss who said it.
No, it was somebody who had just come in. And it was the same kind. I was like, well, that's really interesting. Why did you say that? And it wasn't actually the bully. It was like a behavior or a statement that led me to realize my boss was actually a bully. It uncovered.
So you asked her and she told you, well, your boss. See, right? There is so much power in questions, and we forget that. It's when we have simple questions ready, when we are at a loss for words, or when we are in a tricky situation, the more time we can take to stop the cycle that we are constantly in. Most of us are constantly in cycle, and we just have turning points every now and then when we change the pattern. And when we can throw out questions like that, why would you ask me that? If most people did not have that as learned behavior, because our learned behavior is generally not effective behavior. We have to kind of like unlearn, right? And kind of go back to the basics of, we should be inquisitive as to why people say things, and we should want to know things. It's amazing what you can find out, right? When you start asking people, why would you say that? Or why would you do that? But I just did something that is a big deal with me. When I tilted my head to the side, I have to remember, if we are passive people by nature, which I am, and when we are starting to kind of find our feet and speak up for ourselves, we have to remember not to tilt our heads to the side and and do those little things that project, and I'm not comfortable with the message that I'm sending, and you can walk all over me. I'm passive right now. So it's there's so many little things that can lend to our message that even if we just start out with a small toolkit, like if I start out with a blacklight question, when you say that, are you trying to insult me? And maybe a couple little body language maneuvers, like just keeping my chin up or my chest up and my head tilted forward without the eyes too wide. And if I can have some magic phrases, why would you ask me that, or why would you do that? And some simple like hamburger phrases. Well, when you say that, I feel this way because of what happened to me before. Or when you, like at home, when you say that to me, I feel hurt because I love you and would not say that to you. People are like, but that just, gets people, when you can take all of the extra stuff out of our messages and whittle it down to it's what I really want to know most of the time is, why are you behaving this way? Where are we going to go from here? What did I do to maybe cause you to feel this way? And how can we stop this? There's really a very small set of directions that we would like to go in most of our relationships, but we ourselves get ourselves off course. So I need to have things like navigational phrases. I think maybe we should back up here, or maybe I think this conversation has taken an unfortunate turn and maybe we want to stop here and turn around. When people can use those types of phrases, even in contentious situations, people wonder, how can I turn this conversation around? Pretend like you're navigating a car. I think we might want to stop here. We might want to change gears. Maybe we want to back up and whatever. When people use those phrases, especially because we're used to hearing them with navigational systems these days, like the GPS in our phones, if you can use phrases that people are used to hearing and that they tend to follow under normal circumstances, there's so many little things that can transform people who feel like they're scared to speak up. And it's just those, I'm a big, just get 10 flashcards. And if you have 10 flashcards, you can change your whole life and the way the world sees you. So I
absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's when you start off with snipers and like, we have to name people, Tammy, right? Like, I have to know who am I dealing with. I don't know what the movie was, but have you seen this movie? Somebody like lived in a bus and they were identifying plants in a book and they went around. Okay.
First of all, you're asking the wrong girl. I never remember what movie we watched. And in fact, back when we had Blockbusters, back in the day.
Oh, yes.
I would go and rent a movie and come home and my husband would be like, we saw that. I'm like, no, we haven't. And about 3/4 of the way through is when I'd be like, oh yeah, this looks familiar.
Third time we read this.
So, movie questions.
Well, it's Rumpelstiltskin. I'm a big believer in finding the truth wherever it lives, so the different stories throughout history that have stayed with us, they stay with us because they speak a little bit of truth that resonates with us. And we're like, I know that, Snow White was just sleeping. And when we with that story, Rumpelstiltskin, wasn't that the princess with the golden ball or something like that? Do you remember that one? I don't know, the princess with the gold, I think she was throwing a ball down a well. And a frog came up, and somewhere in that story, I think, was Rumpelstiltskin. One of these days we'll look that up. But Rumpelstiltskin shows up and it's all blah 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 and stole her baby. And she wanted to get rid of Rumpelstiltskin, and the only way she could do it was to name him. Remember that? So she's like, Rumpelstiltskin, Rumpelstiltskin, Rumpelstiltskin. He's like, and poof, vanished, and she got her baby back. And when we know people's names, then we have power. And the difficult person tends to disappear when I can say, oh, you're not Tammy right now. You are the judge, and I know how to deal with the judge, or I know how to deal with that, exploder, or I know that because if we are just going into things, not knowing what other people's names are, not knowing what the names of our own questions are, how can we know how to deal with them or deliver them effectively? So naming things is super important. Know the name, the judge and the time bomb and the exploder, because then you can wait for them to appear, right? Because we all have the inside of us. I don't know what, right? What type of difficult person are you, Tammy, when you are really at your worst? When you are on tear.
I'm judgmental, quick to judge for sure, and passive aggressive used to be my dominant. That's
really
my go-to. Yeah. In
Oh,
fact, people will still tell me sometimes I'm being passive aggressive and I don't feel like I am at that moment. I'm like, oh, I'm really just trying to share with you. But there are some undertones somewhere that they're reading it as passive aggressive. And I know that was my dominant trait.
it's so important for us to put our ego aside and be able to say that, like, if you're saying that, and this has come up in the past, maybe there's some truth to that, what you're saying right now. So that is so important to, we were just talking about this the other day, where passive aggressive is very difficult, in this society, especially. It's become so much part of our communication. And
I think that's why
like,
it's hard. Yeah.
right, it's so normal. It's sarcasm. That study, I can't remember who did it, but how sarcasm is like the number one leading indicator. If there's sarcasm in a couple, in a relationship, you are headed for divorce. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, because it's so true, and it's so part of our everyday communication.
That was so much our love language between my husband and I that when our kids were younger, we were driving down the street and the young boy, my son in the back says, the son in the back of the car says,
the guy,
geez, Mom, I sure am tired. And I'm like, okay, when we get home, you can have a nap. And he goes, sarcasm. And I realized in that moment, because he wanted to be part of our banter, I looked at my husband and said, we got to stop the sarcasm because we joke and he doesn't understand that we're joking. So we had to tone it down.
That must have really helped your relationship.
I hope so. We're still married.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it's so, like Oprah said when she was on television, and I've felt a hole in my chest ever since she's been gone. We should not have to wait till our relationships go bad to make them better. And recognizing little things like that. That's so many people find pride in their bitchiness. So many people take pride in their ability to cut people down, and I tell it like it is type of stuff. And that it's I don't know about you, but I bet you've noticed a trend where people are starting to say more and more, I'm realizing I'm the bully, or I'm realizing I'm the this, and they're realizing it more and more every day, and having breakthrough moments, and I'm going to leave that aside. They don't want to be that person anymore, and cutting out behavior when we can start to identify it in other people. The judge and the snipers. It makes it a lot easier to then recognize, oh, I'm about to say that, or I'm about to do. Oh, which brings me to my next tool, the danger phrase and power phrase list. I don't know if you keep one, but it is such a simple tool that we can use in our families. Like if you have, what's your son's name? I know he's growing up now, but what's his?
Ethan.
Ethan. My nephew's name is Eamon, and Eamon is not always. He does not always feel like he has a voice to say, "Hey, don't talk to me that way." Or I don't like it when you use those words with me. And my family's very verbal, so they're always talking. And sometimes the filter's gone, and little kids sometimes feel run over. But if you have a danger phrase and a power phrase list on like the refrigerator, and they know that the rule is they can go anytime, night or day, if you said something to them that made them feel bad, and they can write that on the danger phrase list. And then you get up in the morning and you look at that list and you're like, it's a safe way for kids to express themselves and tell us things that we did not know we were saying. You have to really be prepared for some of the things that you will find when people tell you the things that you do. But in addition to that, at home, for example, instead of saying at work, instead of saying I have an idea, which we don't want to say because then people connect me with other people who use that phrase, and it's people who really have good ideas don't say that. They say things like I have a solution or I have an answer. So we can keep these lists for so many different reasons and immediately change our verbal patterns. And we can recognize things in other people sometimes more easily than we can in ourselves. I so miss the Bad Girls Club. I don't know if you ever watched that show like on TV. I used to watch. I'm getting over it. I've been therapy, personal in my head therapy. I used to watch way too much reality TV, and I would just
love reality TV. That's like
right. So I would binge watch like The Flavor of Love and Bad Girls Club and all, just the worst of all of the shows. And I would take notes on the danger phrases that they would use, because I didn't want to be associated with those. If you're in that place and you're using those, I don't want to be the one who says, I don't want to be talking about a baby mama I don't want it to be talking about I'm going to cut fur. I don't want it talking about your ratchet hair. And so
Yeah.
but you know what I mean? If we're in pop culture, if I have friends and I'm hanging out, I will start to use patterns and then sometimes inadvertently use them in a more professional environment and just totally tarnish my reputation or, plunge myself into the not ready yet category. And so
you're wondering, where did that come from?
right. And now I know how to control those things. If I in these the dog whistles, I think that they call them, there are certain phrases that kind of signal, you're in my prejudice club, you're in my whatever, anti club, or there's certain phrases that signal that, we're in a certain religion maybe. But I want to be aware as I can of the different phrases that connect me with certain groups or connect me with people who haven't invested in their communication. Like at work, we might want to put it on a danger phrases like not a problem. I want to put, if I'm dealing with difficult people, I want to put on my danger phrase list phrases like calm down, or when I'm dealing with snipers or judges. I'll have to get back to that one because I'm up on those. But when you keep a danger phrase list and a power phrase list, in the process of doing it, you're looking at the phrase, you're writing the phrase. I encourage people to speak the phrase, listen to it on audio, and then you're engaging all of your senses. And then in that sliver in time between when something happens to you and you're about to respond to it, if you have something where your brain can go back to and say, wait a minute, don't say that again. Don't use that pattern that you're used to using and switch to something else. You can get phenomenal results, just bam, overnight by just writing some phrases down. But we have to remember that I was not a big believer in writing things down. I was always, oh yeah, Dad, whatever. We need to put notes all over the place. You got to write it down, Dan. You got to write it down. Like I have it, it's in my brain or in the computer. But there's a reason why, they used to call things that we would write down spells, and the people who wrote them down were called witches because they would come to pass when you would just write them down. So I'm a big believer now into writing down those phrases, and then in the process of doing so, you can change your speech patterns overnight. And then when you're dealing with let's say you're dealing with a judge. So the judge might say to you, did you really think that was something that our clients were going to buy today? Did you really think that our boss was going to like it when you did that? Or, do you really think that is an appropriate outfit for work, or whatever people are saying, all of a sudden feeling judged,
Yeah, their question is really a statement.
Exactly. And so I have like those clarifying questions. When you say that, it sounds to me like you're trying to say X, Y, Z. And what I encourage people to do sometimes with the judge is now this is one of my more controversial strategies, but I don't know why, but I encourage people, when we're being judged, I like to put it all out there and say, when you say that my niece is wearing a questionable outfit, are you trying to say that she looks like a prostitute? When you say that when you ask me when you asked me if I thought that was a good idea or that my boss was going to like that, are you trying to say that I look like a clown and have no business being around you and all of your, your good old boy buddies? Are you trying to say that I am, I try to, like I try to bring it right out there, and say, and exaggerate the point, because then people tend to say, well, no, I'm not. I was either number one response is what do people tend to say when you call them in their behavior? Like, I'm just kidding, or they try to then disengage from that behavior and say no. And I'm a big believer in another tactic for all different difficult people, whether it's the sniper, the judge. When you throw something at them and they give you some type of response where they're knocked off their feet, like a challenger, the challenge, knowing the names of questions and people, when a challenger asks you a challenge question, those are questions like, I saw that you were talking to the boss for 10 minutes in his office. What were you guys talking about? Or what was the deal between you and so-and-so? Or, people are just asking gossip questions that they have no business knowing, because the person in the relationship who has the power tends to be the one who asks all the questions, and they kind of know this in some level, so they ask questions. When you ask people questions like, why would you ask me that? And they say things, like, Well, I'm just curious. Then you might say, yeah, well, are you always this curious? When sometimes we ask questions and people have lame responses, or I'm just kidding or whatever. I'm a big believer in just a 3-second look where you look at people and just wait 3 seconds. Because then people start to just go and blurt out all sorts of uncomfortable things to try to get themselves unstuck, because that silence is so difficult.
Yeah.
But it is so difficult to be silent, don't you think? During these situations, like it's so difficult to just keep our traps shut and stare at people, without tilting your heads to the side or without doing something to let them know, like, I'm letting you off.
And I'm a talker, so silence has definitely been a struggle for me. But can we just define clearly? So we've talked sniper. Sniper
Yep.
is the one who's like doing the verbal zings, or what is the definition of the sniper?
A sniper is somebody, and by the way, I have a cheat sheet that I'll send to you if people would like that. A sniper is somebody who takes pot shots at you and insults you, masked in humor, in public. Like you could be with them, and in private, they pretend they're totally normal. Then you get out with an audience, and all of a sudden they start making these little, funny, insulting comments at your expense. You know what I mean? And you feel like, hey, when did I become the butt of your jokes? That's a sniper. They don't do it in private, public.
Perfect. And a judge sounds pretty straightforward, but what's your definition of a judge?
The judge is somebody who is simply judging you to make you feel bad. For example, if a boss is giving me some feedback or telling me not to do something again, or saying to me that is not an appropriate work outfit, whatever somebody's telling me because they're trying to help me improve, or that's their job to criticize me, that's different. So a judge is just judging you to make you feel bad about that, to make you feel less than.
Okay. And then you mentioned the challenger.
The challenger is asking you questions because they feel impotent, and asking people questions makes them feel as though they are empowered because they are getting you to answer their questions. And so, and anybody who's like, in a relationship, he or she who asks the majority of questions is the one with the perceived power. And so when a challenger asks me a challenge question, such, a question they have no business asking, I want to answer with a magic phrase question, like, get the head tilt out of there, but say something like, interesting, right? Why would you ask me that? And then when they say, which is 99% of the time, they'll say, I'm just curious, because there's no, by definition, if they're asking a challenge question, there is no good reason. And then when you ask them, are you always this curious? Now I've asked you 2 questions and you've answered both of them, and I've not answered any of yours. And it gets so frustrating for them. And then I try to use my favorite tactic of all, Tammy, that we way underestimate, is the broken record. When you deal with, for example, a challenger who says, why were you talking to, Mark out in the parking lot for 10 minutes? And you say, interesting, why would you ask? Well, I just wanted to know. Are you always this inquisitive? Well, yeah. And then you give them the 3-second look, then they'll be like, so what were you talking about? Why would you ask? When you keep doing that over and over again, generally the 3rd time, people will be like, why would you ask? Whatever. And that's okay if you're frustrated with it. I'm not communicating for you. This is for me now. But the simple strategy of, if I just said something that I thought was really good a moment ago, that was the answer to what you asked. I shouldn't have to be making up new words all the time, because number one, that's more brain power that I want to exercise here. And number 2, then you've got me on the run, and people, like kids, they always can sense it when you start changing your tune. How many kids do you have, Tammy?
2.
So
boys.
You know that, like, two little boys?
Well, they're grown men now, but yes.
But you know how I have to ask you about that later on if we have time. But you know how when you learn as a parent, if I say anything other than because I said no, then they've got you on the run and you're fighting all night long. But when you just say what you said, I'm picking up at, I'll see you at 1. Oh, I'm a kid. All my friends are staying out till 2. Well, that may be, but I'll see you at 1. Well, I'm going to be embarrassed if you come and get me that. Well, that may be, but I'll see you at 1. Like, if we don't do that, we realize this is going to be, interminable process. And by the way, that phrase, that may be, but, and then repeating what you just said, I just can't tell you how useful those different things are. And it sounds simple, but we have to learn them. Most people, some people are actually, I don't know why, but like when there's a million different ways to use duct tape phrases.
I love the concept of duct tape phrases, and you have given us a ton of them. Actually, I'm like, I don't know if I
Okay.
wrote them all down, but I'm going to have to go back and make some notes. I like that the concept that, I mean, you have to memorize it. It's just a really simple. When you said this, did you mean that? That's all you have to know. And you could
Yeah.
probably enter into any of those conversations with someone who's being rude, insulting, passive aggressive. Because what I like about it is, first of all, you're saying, here's what I heard you say. And two, is this what you really meant to say? And then that gives them an opportunity to clarify.
Yes. And speaking of that, like when you give them that opportunity to clarify, you find out, like you were talking about earlier, you find out so many things in that moment in time that you never thought. I mean, people will say the darndest things when you ask them,
Mhm.
why are you saying this way? And you'll realize, oh, so many times you find out I was totally wrong, judging you as being hostile. And with audience members, sometimes we think, the real hostile ones, they turn out to be like our number one fans and getting all this stuff. But there's something I was going to tell you about these. Oh, like when I'm dealing with a judge, let's say, or a sniper, and you say to somebody, "Why would you say that?" Or when you say this, are you trying to say that? Let's say that they were to say something like, "Yeah, I'm trying to insult you. I'm trying to say you're stupid. I'm trying to say that you're you're a tip." And when we have set it up the right way and have used a phrase like that, it's easy to say. When you say this or you're trying to say that, our brain can then kind of focus and it gives us a moment to center. And then when somebody does come back, which is very rare, with something such as, well, because I just think you're a dork, right? Whatever. People will always say, well, what if they say this? In the very rare event somebody does that, then you can come back with something like, well, in the future, I can take it when you have a criticism for me, or when you have something to share with me like that, that's even maybe harsh. I can take it. So you can just come right out and say it the next time. You don't have to sugarcoat things for me. I can take it. And when you say things like that, it's just so disarming. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not adding anything. I'm not doing anything other